Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 590 of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-host, the man who saved a fish from a tree last week, Mason Clark,
That's me fishing the tree out of the tree into my belly.
and the man still gunning for co-host of the year, Abe Stein.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all?
I take this year off, man. I don't know what to tell you.
That's a quitter mentality. That's how you know I'm winning. Trying to lull me into false sense of security. No, you won't get away with it, Spencer.
I did post 4 episode topics in our Discord this week.
You were firing them off, and there's a little bit of time between them too, so you were ruminating. You know?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Let's go. This week's not a training grounds topic or that style of topic. We're just going to talk about the regional championship that happened this weekend in Portland. This was, I think, a little bit above 900 player, if I'm not mistaken, regional championship. So about the size of Vegas. Kind of the new. We're not in those 2,000 person regional championships anymore. Kind of a breath of relief for a lot of people. But I want to kind of talk about our thoughts going into it. I know you guys did the episode last week that I missed. But I had a lot of thoughts about Standard going in. And I was kind of curious if your guys' thoughts had changed at all from recording the episode to the time that maybe AB registered your deck, or Mason, you posted the list that you would play.
Abe, you go first since you were actually competing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think much actually did change for me between recording and the event outside of just like actually locking in I was going to play Simic. I think there was some amount of like, what will the room look like that bounced around in my head, but in actuality, I think the only thing that really wound up surprising me was that Jeskai was so big. I knew it would be like I knew it was a deck that would be popular and on the rise, but I didn't think it would be the third most played deck. And Landfall really falling by the wayside. Like those were two things I didn't predict. And some of my last sideboard choices, like I did play like another bounce spell because I was worried about the Landfall matchup. And you know, I was grateful that I'd main decked the Okos that I was playing. That I was actually, I guess, skeptical on initially, but kind of put in the work to try to evaluate better, and when deciding to play in the end. But yeah, I mean the format kind of stayed pretty steady. I felt pretty good about the picture of it I had in my head, and you know, I felt pretty good about the deck I registered on the weekend.
Mason, what about you? Anything that you thought going in to the tournament that maybe you didn't get a mention on the show?
I think the biggest thing that maybe like switched up for me or changed up was like getting like I was pretty like feeling good about living in, but feeling like it needed more work. And I think what was happening for me going into it like was like, oh, actually maybe it didn't need as much as I thought, and maybe this actually is pretty refined. And that I would say that's the biggest thing. That like I thought it might be a bit more of an overhaul, and you know, obviously it's week 2 or whatever, right? So like, and we don't know where it's going to end up, but it felt like, oh, the deck is like way more coherent and solid than I thought, and I thought it was going to be like a fine choice, and it seemed to maybe be a bit of a better one. But I was still pretty firmly on like I would be cubbing if I was there.
Yeah, I was pretty high on cub decks going into the kind of like the final stretch, and you know, my 2 best friends had worked together on Bent Airbending, which is what my teammate had to be registered for the event, and pretty much convinced me that it was like maybe the best choice going in. You know, that doesn't mean that's what I would have ended up playing. I think that I would have ended up on Simic, but or Teamer or something, you know, some kind of ramp style. But they had convinced me pretty well that BAMP was kind of a thing going in. And then, you know, one of the things that I was pretty sure of, that I think that if we really dived into the data, it would bear out, is like one of the reasons that I think Lessons underperformed is so many people cut Storm Chaser's talent from their deck, which I think, from everything that I've heard anecdotally, was like a mistake on the weekend. Everybody wishes that they had played Storm Chaser's talent and things like that, which are things that I just would have said on the podcast that I didn't get the chance to say. But that was kind of my thought. Like, if I was going to play Lessons, I'd play Storm Chaser. My friends probably would have convinced me to play Airbending if I had gone. Which is funny because I was like really low on that deck like 2 months ago. I think the mana fixed itself a lot. Also, it having other good Cub matchups is really important. Stuff like that.
Yeah, getting playable mana and things shaken up a little bit matchup wise, it's a heck of a drug. You know, I played against that deck the first time with Shocklands. I'm like, dang, that's, you know, I knew it in my head, but like I feel it when we play. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I also think the Bloom Tender, for example, was a card that deck got that actually is like one of the few decks that gets to take advantage of a card like that. Which I think is pretty good. So I'm not sure how the deck lists turned out. I haven't looked at all of them from the top 32 or so on, but that's pretty cool. Abe, I want to talk to you about your event though. Like you competed, you actually had a really good start. I kind of want to hear kind of what happened.
Yeah. What happened? That's a good question. So, day one, I started off, or I guess I ended day one losing my last round to fall to 7-2. So I had a really, really strong day one. Had my only loss prior to that last round was to the Simic Omniscience player, where he actually, on turn 3, having won the die roll, cast Consult for 2 lands and found the station land to then continue on to turn 4 me in game 1. Really needed that land drop. So, it's, you know, just like I played a bunch of really, really good and close games of Magic. I was very, very happy with the Simic deck, having just really the ability, especially in open deck lists, to understand the kind of hands that I needed, and the deck having just such a baseline high floor of what it was doing. Like knowing matchups where I needed to just press on the gas harder and mulligan more aggressively to hands that had like Dorks and Cubs, or hands where maybe it was more important that I am able to hit my land drops and kind of play out a longer game. And I also just had some really good draws in the spots, you know, the kind of things that you need in those deep runs. And then day 2, I, having lost to Lessons on the last round of day 1, continued that trend of losing the Lessons. Lost to Teamer Lessons, beat Jacob Milich, who I was very happy to beat because that was I think our 4th time playing, and it put the series at a tied 2-2 between us. I needed to rally back. I'm going to get him the 5th time. We've played a lot in the last 2 years, but yeah, just I don't know, things really weren't breaking my way. The matchup, even though I do think it was favored, just there were times I mulliganed to, you know, 5 in pivotal spots, or just like didn't draw the payoff card. That happened to me against Lesney Ouroboros.
Sorry, which matchup?
Lessons,
got it. Yeah,
it is a Lessons matchup. But I think that, you know, overall, I also got to spend a few times between rounds just like talking to the second coming of Simon Nielsen, Mason Badana, between rounds, just like about how my games had gone, interesting spots I was in, and seeing like him take a very, very similar 75 really deep, all the way to the finals was really cool. And it was a great event. I mean, not the result that I'd wanted. I'd hoped to finish out a bit stronger. It was tough losing like 4 matches in a row, any which of them probably locks me for cash. I did have a pretty rough punt against Jake Beardsley, where I think I must have woken up like 4 a.m. on Sunday, 4 a.m. Pacific. So by the time we were playing, I forgot that Superior Spider-Man doesn't always have flying. It's not always a bringer. And so I made some decisions that implied that I needed to have certain conditions meant to not die to it. I didn't copy my Ouroboroi, but it was just an Ouroboroi, and I could have blocked instead of like exposing myself and losing that game. I felt like the Sultai matchup was one that I was pretty prepared for and felt good into. So it was like I mulliganed to 5 in game 1 and just kind of fell over and died, and then game 2 lost and didn't get a chance to go back in game 3. But I think if I had played a bit tighter there, maybe I flipped that match. But yeah, I mean, not the finish I wanted.
It sounds like you'd run it back though, which is like that's got to be a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I texted Mason, I think, while I was on the plane, and I was just about like something else, and I was like, yeah. Also, I definitely still have the fire because I immediately after losing round 15 as well was like, can I get into like a side draft or something? Like I was looking around for people like, do I have 2 people in the limited thing where I can play like one of their sealed decks against someone else? Like I just want to jam. Like I really felt like I wanted to stay in it, and I was pretty locked in. I felt pretty happy about a lot of my play, outside of just a couple of blunders that either did or did not cost me games. That I definitely could have avoided with probably a little bit more actual reps with my deck. The time constraint there with Lorwyn coming out online so late, compared to when the event was something I felt. But I loved the deck I played. I thought it was, very good in many matchups. I had some insane spots. I almost beat like a Bant Airbending player who had made 1,000,000 1/1s in his own end step. But then I was like a couple of damage in the air short, just from not having enough creatures or whatever. Like there was a bunch of crazy spots I found myself in where I was having a lot of fun trying to solve for the puzzle, and a bunch of games where a lot of decisions really mattered. And at the end of it, like it must have been probably more matches at this RC since any RC since like San Diego, where I played Red Black, where at the end of it, like me and my partner were both like, wow, those were crazy games. Like that was awesome. And so yeah, it was a really great tournament for me.
That's awesome. Before we get into the decks, I want to hop on what you just said, because there's been a lot of talk about this format, both in our Patreon Discord and online, about Badger Won't Cub and stuff like that. One of the things that I find I love this standard format. This is probably my most played standard format in a long time. Like I just find myself, rather than playing a video game, or jumping on like a thing that I would normally do, or watching YouTube, like just jamming games in this format. And I think that what Abe said is like it is very much a puzzle format. Like what line leads to my win rather than anything else. And I wanted to highlight that. Like, there are things to not like about this format, but I think that it is very diverse. The decks are very different from each other, and I really enjoy it. Should we talk about decks, Mason?
Let's get into it. Yeah, there's a lot to cover heading into the Pro Tour this weekend, and RCQs for everyone.
Do you want to talk about Bant? Because you kind of talked about playing against it for the first time. I'm kind of curious, like, where you think Bant Airbending lands. As far as like most played decks, it was the best performing of those decks. By the data, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like it even kind of happened on the show, right? Like if you like listen to the episode near the end, I had like made some like small notes for us to go into it all, and I had just forgot about it being airbending, despite talking to people and being like, oh yeah, the shock lands are like a meaningful upgrade for that deck, alone. Like that's something to be thinking about. And then like we do the episode, and I'm like, Abe, is there any deck you want to talk about that I forgot? And he's like, ban airbending. I just feel like a lot of people, we underappreciated just how much, just once again, only the shock lands going in the deck was going to help this deck, because it was a pretty consistent and powerful deck before, and getting access to like good mana in of itself was just like a huge upgrade. So I think like a little bit of that, that's not to say players on like, average all forgot, but I do think that like it probably just didn't get the amount of respect it deserves. And I'm really interested going to the Pro Tour to see like what the sideboard plans and respect for ban airbending, looks like. Because we go back to Worlds before Lessons was like a deck that everyone was really playing. Airbending was some of the decks that like multiple teams brought in various forms, thinking it was super strong. So I'm curious to see if there's a repeat of that.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a viral tweet going around that was like, "Don't play the deck that won the last tournament. It's like a trap in Magic." And then, you know, the deck that won the last tournament was Ban Airbending. The best performing deck was Ban Airbending. Maybe it's not always a trap.
Yeah. Who's to say? Who's to say? Hey, what do you think about airbending? I know we know Spencer is, like your friends are behind, and it seems like you were as well. I'm curious, like, how do you feel after the event?
Yeah, I think Bant Airbending seems really good. I know a lot of people who did choose to play it at the event to varying success. I think that a lot of where I like Bant Airbending, and really how I see the format right now, is that there's like Badgermole Cub is by far the best card, and whether or not that's something that needs to be addressed by legality and ban decisions is outside of my my decision making parameters, but where it is right now is that there are so many games that are determined quickly by expenditure of mana, and it snowballs really quickly with Badgermole Cub. I think that Airbending is not a great Badgermole Cub deck, but it does generate disproportionate advantage through some of the ways it has to just, cheat its spells through like Airbending,
I love that you said that, because it just happens to be a Badgermole Cub deck is how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, Badgermole Cub is so good that you would play it, and your deck does have all these mana dorks in it anyway, so like it is a valuable piece of the puzzle, but it's not one of these Nature's Rhythm, like multiple Cubs go crazy decks. It's not like looking to play Gaia's Cradle. It just happens to play Gaia's Cradle. Like it's not super reliant on it, but it's incredibly potent. I think that as long as the format, which is where I think it is currently, is about kind of spending mana to impact the board and let that expenditure win the game, whether it be through Craterhoof Behemoth or Ouroboros or making a million 1/1s, whatever it is, like trumping that is the most important thing for most decks to be doing, while also respecting the fact that some decks like Lessons are going to be controlling the battlefield and killing you while doing it because they have their machine set up that goes burr, they have the Monument Factory, or Control, who's just keeping any of that from happening. But in some way or another, the game is about battlefield presence, and I think that the Bant deck plays by those rules really well by having a way to go over the top and do it very quickly. In one of the first games I played a game right before the start of the tournament with Nicole Tipple, where I was on the play and she on turn 3 just killed me. Just like on the draw, like hit off of her, hit off of her thing into the Bant Ang at the crossroads into Appa with a Dock Warlock in play. And was like, oh yeah, actually I just go here. You're actually just dead.
That's like, the moment that sold me too, for whatever it's worth. Well, me and Matt had it happen to him, and then Matt told me about it, and I was like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah,
if your mana works now, that's crazy.
A turn 3 fetch quest with a Dock Warlock in play or whatever is just like, yeah, maybe I die. And that alone makes deck worth playing, because a lot of the times I was playing matchups like against Simic Omniscience or even the mirror match, like I was just looking at my hand and going, okay, can I like realistically kill my opponent on turn 4? Like, do I have the mana that I will need, that if I find one of my 10 cards that gets me there, like, am I going to be in a good spot? And often enough, I was. So the ability to do that is really important. Where I'm not so certain about how it's going to fare moving forward is kind of the control matchup. I'm not entirely certain how good that is, because it was hard. Two of my friends played Jeskai Control. Both of them made day 2. One of them lost to was actually the person who there's a tournament report going around from when people played Izzet Elementals, where in turns in the last round you got a concession while the game was still kind of in progress to be able to make the Pro Tour. my friend is the one who was the Jeskai opponent on the other side of that. But the overall feeling from them in playing the matchup was that it wasn't clear whether the airbending players really knew how to navigate that and what was going on there. So I think there's still room to be explored in terms of some specific matchup stuff, because I think that so much of what has probably been explored is building that deck with the right mana to cast all of its things and do its thing. I think there's still some room for adaptability, but the deck is really potent in a world that's all about playing the battlefield. It's definitely more maneuverable than than Simic, and it has, you know, a combo game that is less reliant on inertia on the board. Like, you can do it with fewer pieces, and you're a bit more resilient to interaction. Perhaps at the cost of being not quite as fast as consistently. Like your Simic hands, your Bad Falco hands, like, you will just do the thing and they'll die. Whereas you kind of have to hit and be a little bit lucky in some of your flips with the Bant deck. That's my feelings on it.
Yeah, there were less than 50 matches played at the RC in the Bant versus Control matchup. A Bant taking in 53% of those. So not a very large sample size. Bant did get the edge on it, but I actually, the reason I didn't like the deck initially was actually the Lessons matchup. I did not feel like Bant Airbending was favored in that matchup, and it looks like it went about 50-50 with that deck. So if, like, control style decks, you know, are close to 50-50, you know, that's a lot of coin flips that you might have to worry about in something like the Pro Tour.
I think something to remember also is that, like, the control deck had an overall bad tournament, which, at least to me at the RC level, can say something about average pilot quality. Like, a lot of the best players in the room are going to play the better decks. And so sometimes decks are very represented and not many players who have outstanding finishes play them. And I would believe that, especially, like, I know for a fact, as much as the Jeskai pilots that I was playing with felt like the Bant players hadn't thought about the matchup or played it much, I'm for sure that on the other end of that, the Jeskai control players probably had not too. And there's got to be a lot of maneuvering there with the flash threats and, you know, a lot of decisions to be made, a combo looming over them. Like, those seem like difficult games to navigate, but overall, the underperformance of Jeskai, I think, in the data, I don't know if it's necessarily indicative of the matchups as a whole, or if there's like another factor into play there. That's just kind of my feelings looking at it and my experiences with the format compared to the data. But it definitely had a rough one there.
Let's move on to the second best performing deck, which is Landfall. Mason, this deck had the second best performing deck, but it also was a dog in every other Badgermole Cub matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was something that I know a lot of my friends who went into Spotlight Atlanta, that they really felt was like one of the reasons they wanted to play Cub was they felt it was really strong, but also that it kind of like messed up the Landfall deck, and they thought the Landfall deck was relatively pretty good, but they kind of like, oh, I'm like I'm the better green deck, basically, even though you're kind of doing different things. And so that makes a lot of sense. I think the Landfall deck is quite good. Like, I haven't played it a ton personally, but I played it a little, and I've done a lot of VOD reviews with clients who have been playing Landfall, and I am just quite impressed pretty consistently. I think Sapperling Nursery was a real good get for this deck because it also not want to say fix, maybe like a better way to describe this is add a dimension to the deck. But I think one of the things the deck did before was I make the tallest man you've ever seen. And now it's like I make the tallest man you've ever seen, but also I go really wide, and sometimes I sneak through 12 damage. And when you think about it, I know we have a tendency, I think, as players to put Terror of the Peaks, for example, on our living end deck, right? So it comes back and everyone dies. They take a bunch of damage. In reality, it's 12 damage is enough. Getting back 6/6, as we'll talk later in the show, is probably just enough. And I think that Sapling Nursery did a lot to both add more elements that are hard to attack and also help some matchups that before might have been a bit trickier.
I got the chance to play this Landfall deck, and I posted it in our Patreon Discord. I was like, hey guys, I'm playing this deck, and it's way better than I thought it was. just like the amount of work that people have put into this deck that makes it. So I think a lot of people hear Landfall and they hear like the deck from like 8 months ago, right? And they're like, oh, that deck was kind of like mediocre, not very good. This deck is not that. This is like very resilient, still pretty explosive, and really punishes people for like keeping, like, if you keep a bad hand against this deck, you're like actually in pretty big trouble. The way that was true of the other deck, while also just being able to like close out way more difficult games. And I promised I would say this on this podcast to somebody. I've been a known hater of Esper Origins to the point where, like, in team testing, I've been like, "Oh, they have Esper Origins in their deck. We have already won." This is a very good Esper Origins deck. Like, it's the first time that I've seen the card be like, "Oh, that's actually really good in this deck."
The Green Fable, the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, it's actually quite good in this. I wouldn't say that, but it is quite good.
I will say, as much as I think that card is not great, and also when I was hearing Landfall players talk at the event, they were like, "This is the worst card, and I hate that it's in my deck." Every time I played against it on Moto, and like they had an Ice Steel Explorer going, and they were like, "Oh, like here's my Fable passage. Oh, I milled an Esper Origins." I was mad. Like, every time that happens as the opponent, you're like, I cannot believe they're getting more value here. And it really is like a kind of a necessary evil sometimes, that deck. Like, and it's so good because they see so many cards and their deck is so thin. And when they do start milling with Ice Tills, like,
yeah,
they just hit. Like, it's just
I think the card is yucky poo-poo, but it is good in this deck.
Yeah. I also think, looking at the Simic matchup specifically, like, the Selesnya build of the deck, while it did have a low representation, like the build with seam rips and everything, did have a close to even matchup against Simic in its smaller sample. I think it was something like 30 matches, and it came out like 15 to 13 or something like that, like just 20 matches. So it's not even like it's hopeless. I think that even in my own testing of Landfall, I had played a list that won a challenge early on when the Landfall deck started to get popular, where I guess they'd identified that the best way for them to win was to say, okay, if we're not going to interact with each other, I'm just going to play 4 main deck Hydra and some Snakeskin Veils so that my opponents who do interact can't kill them as often, and I'll just double this thing's power a bunch of times and kill you. Like, this is going to be my angle of attack. And so I think there are ways for, like, if that's the only problem matchup, I think there are ways for Landfall to react. But I think a lot of players who maybe were interested in playing Landfall or would have played Landfall, again, probably, like, if you already have Bad Admiral Cubs, it's not a hard stretch to say, like, maybe I should just err on the side of the Simic deck that seems good into the spread. But the numbers on the deck definitely tell me it's underrepresented. I was very surprised that not as many people had played it in Portland.
I agree with that. I did a league with the Selesnya version as well. And in that league, I went 4-1 and played against Simic 4 times. And afterwards, I was like, yeah, that matchup's not favored for me. But, like I definitely can see why it's winnable. Going 3-1 against it. But let's talk about the deck that, Abe, you caused a controversy about in our Discord. Let's talk about Lessons.
It's just not that good. I don't know. It's good. It's just not that good. It's an agency trap. That's my actual evaluation of it these days. Like, if you're someone who loves to play, and a lot of people do, they love to play decks that draw a lot of cards and cast a lot of removal spells so that they have control over the game, this deck's great. But I think that even with Storm Chaser's talent, which you definitely need to play, because the only way your deck is at all threatening is if you have multiple proactive game plans to lean on while you're playing all these removal spells. Like, the matches I did lose, and it was actually when I ended day 1, I was like, oh my god, I'm playing against Lessons, I'm going to go 8-1 for sure, no way I lose. And my opponent in both games just went like, Gran, kill your dork, loot, kill your other play, untap, monument, attack, make a treasure, kill your thing. I was like, oh, like, this is what it feels like to lose this deck. They need to win the die roll, have Grand and just like be pressuring me while they're and like gaining advantage while they're doing these things. This is what my losing games look like. And that was just both games. I was like, oh, like, how come that never happened in testing for me? And I realized we had gone off of testing non-talent lists because they were what people were talking about more. And so then I had to actually adjust overnight my plan for the Storm Chasers talent builds to make sure, and also my keep range for those builds, to be like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm respecting the fact they can kind of delver me out with, like, here's a prowess thing and a grand, and I'm going to kill a creature at a time. And rather than that leading to, well, you just keep on drawing creatures and those kill me, you know, I can actually, like, just kill you in the process. So if you're going to play Lessons, I think you have to do that. But I just don't know that the deck has a meaningfully positive matchup spread comparative to other things. And that might be really controversial to say on the show, but, like, it's still a fine deck to RCQ with. You can play it if you want, you feel good about it. I think the very good, like, the best Lessons players play it much better than the just okay Lessons players, kind of similar to Arclight Phoenix in the sense that you do see a lot of cards and have a lot of decisions to make, but at the same time, it still has felt so exploitable. And I don't know, it's not a deck that I feel like has a strong spread that I'm excited to play.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a pretty similar spot, all things considered. I think, like, one of the good things about the Lessons deck, when it, like, especially it first came out, was it sidestepped a lot of stuff. And I think when the Lessons deck isn't being presented with, like, piles of hate or decks that are really thinking about it, it obviously hums incredibly well. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where people do know about the Lessons deck and they do respect it. And so I think it's going to be a lot like Dimir in my mind, where there are plenty of weekends where Dimir is a good choice and is, like, a totally fine deck. Probably never the best deck. And I think that Lessons, on the other hand, could be the best deck in theory, but it's, like, something that I would probably, like, turn to on some weekends. And it's the style of deck I think people really do enjoy. And I think you will see a lot of Lessons no matter what. And there'll be, like, lesson truthers, you know, like, friend of the show, Jacob Pablo, is somebody who's done really well with this deck a lot. And is also someone who I know is like, ooh, like, some of these matchups, like, they are getting better, not only at playing against us, but their plans are getting better. And I do think the move off Storm Chasers talent has hurt the deck personally on the spread of what's happening right now. But I still think even if you were to, like, you know, play theoretically optimal, you know, whatever that may be, whether it's talent or not, I think you would still be in that kind of position like Abe talked about. And for me personally, I'd much rather be in these more proactive spots. And I think you're getting attacked from a lot of different angles. You have a lot of different things you need to answer, and you're kind of like a control deck. And I think the introduction of some of the things to the metagame, and decks like Van Airbending getting a lot more efficient with their mana, and the Sultai Reanimator deck. I always want to call it Dimir for some reason. Anyways, but the Sultai Reanimator deck, like, that deck gaining, I think, a lot of power makes things a lot worse. Like, them getting a bunch of main deck naturalizes that are also these, like, you know, draw twos, and they, like, flash them back to Superior Spider-Man. I think that really does hurt, because you are a deck that we talked about last week on the show, us liking a little bit of Jeskai about, because we thought a lot of people were going to play Lessons. And we talked about how this is a deck that can very easily point and click and remove the cards that actually do matter. So I do think if you're going to play something like Lessons, you need to be adapting. And maybe that means you're more teamer with, like, Toph the Hard-Headed. I think that's the name of the card. The 4-mana you Earthbend when you cast spells. Like, so I think there needs to be some innovation before I'm going to be really on board. But I do think you have a lot of powerful things going on. And I'm curious to see, like, can you solve all these new problems?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't join the show last week, but I already was 100% sure that you should not cut Storm Chasers talent. Just like, it's kind of like what Abe said. Like, you can't have so few angles of attack, because, like Abe said on the show, that makes you exploitable. Like, then it's like, I just need to stop this one angle, and now your deck doesn't function, right? And while that might not matter against some decks, it does matter against your overall matchup spread and things like that. And I think the thing that we saw is that, you know, Teamer Lessons itself outperformed Isn't Lessons because there was adaptations. This is something that was talked about in our kind of our team CCM2G Patreon Discord, just as an option for people. It got a little bit poo-pooed by some people, but I don't know. I played Teamer Lessons in multiple varieties. I think Toft's really good, like Mason said, and I think that the deck's definitely not dead. Like, the Is It version had a bad showing, but like we've mentioned it ad nauseum now. Like, just stop cutting Storm Chasers down. Like, don't do that. Let's move on to Jeskai. This was a deck that you were really high on going into the event, Abe, so I'd like to let you go first.
Yeah, I think Jeskai is pretty solid into the world that we're playing. I think that Day of Judgment and Ultima are really good cards when everyone's putting things into play and on the board and is just trying to kill you like that. Jeskai Revelation, as much as everyone likes to clown on it and say that it's bad, I think is just actually one of the most powerful things you can do for one card in the format. Like, it just is really strong. It turns the corner really well. And I think that the list that top 8'd that just leaned into the strengths of Jeskai and the best cards in the control deck was really smart. And I don't know, I think so long as the games rep Admiral Cubs and stuff, like, there's a lot of room for a deck like Jeskai to perform. I do think that with some of the breakout other decks that maybe didn't have top 8 finishes but had some strong showings, I think like the Elementals deck, like there's a lot of decks that have game plans that are really strong against what Jeskai is able to manage. But I don't know, I think that as much as the deck did not perform really well in the aggregate, it's definitely not what I'd call, my top choice anymore, like it was maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. But it's certainly still a deck that can contend. It's I think not so good that it should have been the third most played deck in the room at the RC, but definitely not so bad that I would expect it to fall off the face of the map. It's not like it's Dimir Oculus or something from Modern. Like it's definitely a better deck than that comparatively. I don't know, Mason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I imagine, so I guess for like transparency, I got hit with like the snowstorm or whatever, and so our RCQ got canceled. But like I was gonna play Jeskai Control at my local RCQ because I was like, well, even though it's not the first weekend, I don't really want to play Lessons. I don't have Badgermole Cubs, and I think this deck is like pretty well positioned. And I was talking to one of my friends who's going to go with me. I was like, well, I think my deck will be better in like 5 weeks, assuming that like not a whole lot changes, because like in 5 weeks, I think things would be a lot more settled. And I imagine this would actually be like a really good choice potentially if things play out kind of naturally, versus right now, I think it's like kind of a reasonable to like potentially good if things play out the way I'm sort of expecting them to. Right. And so I think they're, like you said, if games are about Badger Mole Cub and those sort of things, I'm feeling pretty good. I am a little, sometimes I play versus the new Reanimator deck with Jeskai, and I'm like, got him easy, washed, no problems. Other times I'm like, dang, they got hands. And both of our decks are evolving rapidly and adapting to what's happening. So I think there's going to be a lot left to be seen there. But I think, the Jeskai deck does have some issues of balancing, like, what does winning really look like? What's the efficiency and what answer spells are you supposed to be playing? And it is tough to like have that right mix. And decks like Landfall Gaining, things like Sapperling Nursery make, I think, leaning on some of the spot removal cards a little harder. Even though Get Lost does answer it, it's very easy to like even get that first token out of a Sapperling Nursery, right? And then suddenly it's not overwhelming, but it is like you're in kind of a spot and you have to answer another thing, and that's a 3/4, and the maps, and just little things like that I think kind of add up. So yeah, I have some worries about the Jeskai deck. But I think that it has the tools to potentially answer all of them. I also wonder, like, am I supposed to just be blue-white? Like, do I really need this red? Am I supposed to, go maybe a little lighter and only sideboard my red cards? So I think there'll be some innovations, and this is another deck that I'm like really curious to see what people do, especially because there's also the subset of people playing the Gwen Stacy, I believe Shuko is the dragon's name combo. That's like a Jeskai offshoot. I would say that deck's a bit more mid-rangey, but some people play it like a control deck. So there's a lot of interesting space going on.
Mason, I just want to ask because I know that, like you just said, like moving away from, like I guess moving away from the red cards or just sideboarding them, like looking at the list from, I guess third place. That's basically what they did, right? Like they're not playing Helix. They're the only red card in their deck is actually just Jeskai Revelation. It's just blue white. With Revelation, like what are your thoughts on, is that like more the direction that you're personally interested in going, or do you think that's maybe
Yeah, I think this is good. I'm pretty low on Jeskai Rev, and maybe this is a big disconnect moment. Like I was on one of that card because it just felt like it was so clunky in my hands. So when I imagined going low on red, it was like, maybe a Braids in the board or something like that. But this might actually just be a lot better. I had not looked at this list too closely, if I'm being 100% honest. I'm looking at it right now as we're talking. This makes a lot of sense to me. It does sort of look like what I was looking for in a lot of ways. One of my worries, I'm curious what y'all two think, is like cards like Seam Rip and Aang's Iceberg, I think are like weird, I want to say necessities if you're going to be playing like a mostly a blue-white deck. And I was a little worried to kind of go so heavy on those kind of cards. But yeah, I don't know how you feel about all this as well, Spencer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially if you're going blue-white, I think you kind of have to play Aang's Iceberg. This is a card that I actually played against. I don't know about you, because you did a lot of standard testing going to the RC as well, as I was doing with teammates and stuff. But Aang's Iceberg was actually like really played pretty heavily the week going into this format, this tournament, for at least that I saw, Abe. And it was interesting because like it gives you like it honestly, I mean, this one's only playing one, but like I definitely put against a list that we're playing like 4 of them. And I think that it's a necessary evil. And the fact that it's not an artifact and is an enchantment, right? It's an enchantment, right? I'm pretty sure.
I believe so. Correct.
Yeah. Really leads me to want to play Ultima, which is the thing that I thought was weird about the third place list. I thought Ultima was like really strong going into this weekend. So I was really surprised to see 3 Jeskai Revelation and no Ultima. But I don't know. I agree that with Mason's assessment for the most part. Like, I don't have to play Lightning Helix. Like, that's not a thing that I have to do. Lightning Helix, is another, 2-minute answer. It's not like I'm winning games by like burning my opponent out, right? Like it is essentially just something that lets me play more painful mana, recoup on that painful mana, and kill small creatures. But I don't have to do that.
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no. I think that just on like Lightning Helix and Ultima, like I think those are pretty. The decisions that I think were made in deck building really played out for the way this tournament went, right? Like there were not a lot of red decks, there were not a lot of landfall decks, and those are really where you feel, I think, the pain of not having Helix or Ultima the most. I mean, between like some of your worst matchups like Dimir, which was not really present, which surprised me a bit. I thought the deck would have a bit more of a presence than it did. And also, right, no red decks, and landfall being well below what I think most people thought it would be in terms of representation. Like, Ultima no longer is needed to solve, like, the Bossing Say problem, or just the general, like, Earthbent land problem. Like, a lot of the value that I found in it, or have felt having it has made a big difference, is that. And then also, like, not needing to worry about the life total as much. I think both of those really played into this list's favor. Whether or not those are necessarily the best choices for moving forward depends on the room, but for this room, this was definitely the right list.
Okay, I love it. I'm not low on control decks for what it's worth. Like, I know some people poo on Jeskai Revelation or whatever. I think control is fine in this format. It was not even 5 weeks ago that I was saying that I thought it was a rock paper scissors format between Jeskai control, Cynic, and Lesson. So, I want to talk about Boros Dragons really quick. I not only want to talk about it. If you guys want to talk about other stuff, we can too. But I think this deck is a total trap by the data. It's got a very small sample size. It made a top 8. I think this deck is very, very bad. And I would encourage people not to play it. I played the deck myself. I think that Clarion Conqueror is very good. It is like a reason to want to play a deck. But I think that the efficiency of this deck is far below what this format asks of you. And the power level is even below that. And I would encourage people to not try and pick this up.
Well, yeah, to me, this sort of, and Abe, if you want to bring us back to Boros Dragons in a second, bring us back. But it kind of just jumps up to me as like, if you want to play a Clarion Conqueror deck, right, then you should probably play like a dedicated Clarion Conqueror deck. And I guess like, maybe I'll look back on this format and be a hater, like right now, and I'll feel silly. But like, could you not just do sort of like what the winner Tristan did in Rhythm for Clarion Conqueror and be a much more powerful proactive deck, or like dedicate more to being this deck? And it just feels like it is a Clarion Conqueror deck to me, and it feels like there has to be better ways to be a Clarion Conqueror deck. Like, I just don't believe that this Dragon package is backing it up. Even Sarkhan can be a really strong card and can run away with things, so I just don't even think we're like good at enabling that all the time. So I've seen this deck before. It's like a super cool deck, and I wish something like this. I hope to be wrong. I hope that something like this is a big part of the meta game, and maybe it just like, I'm wrong about this now, or it will become more lean. But yeah, I'm kind of a doubter on this, and I just feel like let's make a Clarion Conqueror deck. Let's do that instead.
Yeah, I think I agree that Clarion Conqueror is the backbone of this deck's playability. I think the curve of Momo into Clarion Conqueror is really strong. I think Momo enabling an aggressive mid-range deck that is base white is a game changer. I think once you're already there, playing red feels kind of natural, because if you're already going to have to play Momo, you have to look for other flying creatures. The dragons are there. There's the, like all of that at play. But I think that there have to be other ways to do it. I will say that something that is actually the one loss that Mason Bodana took on day one was to an Is It Looting deck with Conquerors in the board and a light white splash in the main. It was also a bit of a otherwise not traditional looting deck, but still, like, looking at now that we have these shock lands, like, where are other places we can splash in this single white 3-drop that is an aggressively statted creature, right? Like 3/3 flying for 3 is a pretty good rate. It has the cost of my cards can't be doing other things, but in a deck that's just trying to exchange resources and attack, I mean, who cares? So I don't know. I think that if anything, it shows that there's room for a deck like this to work and to win. But I think that I'm not a huge fan of that being just, well, I'll just put in the good cards and then some 5-drops that kind of fill it out. Like, my first round I played against someone who was playing, and now I think there was still some room for improvement on their overall deck list, but was playing like a Shiko Jeskai deck with Momo and Clarion Conqueror and some other things, and that seemed pretty interesting. Like, can you build a mid-range Jeskai deck that's using Shiko as this top-end Goblin Dark Dwellers that can also rebuy Conquerors when they die? Is that a space to work in? Like, can you do that maybe with Gwen's even, right? If you're really going to lean into Shiko, maybe there's room for that. But I think that the Boros approach is definitely making a lot of a little, if that makes sense.
I'm glad we agree, because
one thing I will say is this is a great lesson, by the way, on creatures have a low fail rate, right? Like, if you ironically, right? Like, if you play creatures with a little bit of interaction, it's like really good. And this is why, like, on week ones, I'm often so high on playing a deck that curves out and applies a little pressure, right? Like, this sort of thing, I think, really speaks to that in my mind. So I just wanted to hype that up as a potential learning moment for a lot of people. If you're seeing this, like, how in the world could this ever win? It's like Gabe said, Mobo into Clarion Conqueror into any dragon or some sort of interaction piece, that's good. That's going to, like, you know, mess someone up if your deck is weak to Clarion Conqueror, which a lot of decks are.
Any other decks that you guys want to talk about, or should we move on?
I mean, Sultai Reanimator, I'm curious how y'all think about it. I mentioned a little bit before, but I didn't know. Like, I feel like, I don't know. I didn't feel like I didn't give time for you two to speak about it. If there's something you want to talk about it.
I actually want to talk about a different Evoke Elemental deck, but I think that Sultai is a deck that's very good at using Deceit specifically, and that has been very, very good for them.
I think Sultai did really well. This was a deck that our team was medium high on going into like week 0 testing, and I think that we got some things wrong that took us off of it. So I don't know. I thought this deck was pretty dog water like 6 months ago. Had very few good matchups, and then as the format has shaken out, I feel like it has both improved and some of its predators have kind of like been less around, if that makes sense. So
I think that Formidable Speaker made the deck far more consistent, and I think just the games where it gets to go Deceit you, Formidable Speaker, like Reanimate, like those are really, really, really good. If they happen to have a bringer in their opener, but if not, I mean, the deck has only gotten better. I'll say that. Like it used to be feeling like it was falling behind. It's gotten to trim a lot of the fat and play some real impact makers between Wistfulness, Deceit, Formidable Speaker, and that whole package. It really feels a lot better.
I actually just want to call out Wistfulness was a card that was like right before the tournament went out on my radar. I was like, oh wow, this card might actually like make lessons not very good. Like straight up, this card's crazy. Just we didn't mention that during the lessons thing, but that card's way better than the first time that I cast it, I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, there are so many just artifacts and enchantments just lying around that you just like, you always get value off of this thing.
Yeah, and I think that really helps the B plan, right? Now that your Superior Spider-Man is like the fact that Spider-Man can trigger these effects again, right? Like, you know, you pay your blue and your black and double green, and then your Spider-Man turns into Wistfulness, and it's like, all right, I killed your artist talent, I killed the next one, right? It's like, oh, that, like, obviously this isn't as good as reanimating everything in my graveyard, but like when we're playing this fair game, and maybe I even slowed myself down post board, right? And these cards are all staying in for you. I think that really changes the dynamic of these things and allows for you to do things like, oh, wow, okay, like I tried to set up, you blew this up a little bit, even though I have this card that maybe is pretty good against you in theory, you know, in the form of Soul Guide Lantern, where I draw into it later, I still kind of got, you know, put on my back foot. And I think that's pretty huge. I think Deceit does a very similar thing. Like, I think a lot of people were surprised when they got Deceited, and then Superior Spider-Man for blue, blue, black, black, do it again. You know, and it's like, oh, wow, this is like really powerful.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a more flexible deck than it was before Lorwyn, and that's a lot.
The
other deck I want.
Oh yeah, that's okay.
The other deck I want to talk about is the Is It Elementals deck. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see this one.
I did.
But this one definitely was a big surprise to a lot of people at the RC. I think it was kind of a spin off of the Scam deck that did well in that challenge last week. But just for the listeners who might not be familiar, it's like 4 Ashling rekindled, 4 Flamebringer, 4 Sunderflock, 4 Vibrance was the red-green one, 4 Wistfulness, which is the blue-green one, and 3 Deceits. Ashling's commands, full play set of those. The list that did best has some bounce offs and a spider sense, and some springleaf drums. And then 24 lands, you can tutor up a couple of different creature lands, a mountain monastery, and it has 4 Captain Souls as well to kind of help with the control matchups. This deck looked really impressive to me every time I was able to see some of its games. I think that Flame Breeder and Ashling are both incredible mana engines, or at least like bursts of mana comparable to kind of the power level of Cub without being so all in terms of game plan, and a lot of its cards get to be a little bit better. And Sunderflock especially is just such a good card for a deck like this to have access to when the games are about, just whatever's on board, because when you can stick a big elemental and then follow it up the following turn with, let me bounce all of my opponent's creatures and attack you for like 8 or 10, that's just pretty hard to beat. And even in games where maybe it's gummed up and there's things in the way and you're trying to clear the way, finding a Sunderflock can immediately just end the game because of the way that it's one-sided. So I don't know, I think this is a deck that definitely uses the most new cards out of things that I had seen. Roaming Throne, I have a friend who actually was part of the team that was building this. Roaming Throne was a very last second edition, literally on the drive up, ordered for pickup to be able to find the 4 copies to play it, and it kind of turned out to be the card that changed a lot for them. But having just a thing you could ramp into that was sticky and on the board and gave you some additional value was really good. And yeah, so I don't know, I think this deck is just really cool. There's a lot of room for it to innovate. I don't think the list they played is necessarily perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's only another day or two before deck list submission, so I don't even know how much refinement it's going to get before the Pro Tour. So it's definitely something I want to put on people's radar. If you're interested in tuning around a deck like this and you haven't seen it, or you didn't even know it really existed, check it out, because it's a very powerful thing to be doing in a format like this, and plays a lot of the new cards and has so much room to be explored because it's just this 5-color elemental thing.
Well, our next talking point was going to be what are our thoughts going into the Pro Tour, and I posted some deck lists, including the one that Abe just talked about, in our Patreon Discord before the show started, and one of the ones that I posted was it, and this specific deck, and I think this looks really cool, really interesting, and I also really love being wrong about cards. I thought Sunderflock was kind of a meme until I saw a couple of decks with it, and I'm like, oh, this actually makes a ton of sense in this deck specifically. And then I saw this deck, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just wrong. This is actually crazy good. So love that poll, Abe. Mason, anything you want to say about the deck?
I think the Office meme of they're the same picture when it comes to, I forget its name now, the elemental that's in this deck, the Flame Breeder, excuse me, that and Badgermole Cub, in the context of this deck, they are kind of the same card, right? You just jump ahead on mana. Now, Badgermole Cub asks a bit more of you and gives you a lot more when you get multiple and things happen, but this card I think is really, really powerful, and I'm really interested to see what happens with this deck as it continues to evolve, because I think there is really something here, and it's just week 1, so I'm pretty impressed by this. Sunderflock is a card that for one, I keep thinking it has flash for some reason. I don't know why, but it looks like a flash creature to me. But it's it would be so messed up if you could flash this thing.
It's the lightning bolt in the art.
Yeah, they're getting me there. I think it reminds me of Resto Angel. I'm actually looking at it right now. I think the big wings kind of coming down. Anyways, this card is really, really good. I was a little skeptical of some of the first versions I kind of saw of this deck, but as I continue to see it more and more, it's oh, okay, this is probably something pretty powerful. And like Abe was saying, I wonder if the PT, this will be one of those decks that really jumps off the pages at players. So
is there anything I kind of want to go first. I don't know what to expect for this PT. Like, to be completely honest, like, usually, like, I have a vibe of, like, oh, like, you know, there's a lot of room to innovate or very little room to innovate. And I honestly don't know, because so many things have surprised me. And because we're in such a high power level format, right, that it makes you think, oh, it's going to be so much harder to innovate. Like, there's so many good cards. And, like, the format is tested in a lot of real ways. I honestly don't know if we're going to see complete format shakeups or if it's just going to be another Badgermole weekend. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Abe?
I think that it's a Badgermole Cub world, and everyone's living in it. But I think that that's kind of the truth of it. I think it's been made very clear by the data from Portland that not only are there decks like, you know, like the Elementals deck that can add new angles of attack to the format, but also, I mean, looking at the, like, Tristan's deck that won, there's also room for, you know, to just continue to lean into that and build the best decks for the Badgermole Cup mirrors. So I don't know that I expect that to change going into the PT. I think the question will be, will that still be the case after the PT? Like, what will be the best way to do it? Is it to go around Badgermole Cub and to play, you know, maybe play something like Elementals, or play a build of a control deck that's able to contain it, or, you know, is it to lean in and do that? I think time will tell on that, but I would have a hard time betting against it continuing to be about Badgermole Cup. With an outside shot of landfall going back to trying to kill as aggressively as possible and being able to really press in the gas in those matchups, as opposed to maybe some of the grindier stuff they do. Like, I could see a world where Esper Origins is a sideboard card in Mono Green Landfall, the same way that Hydra is often a sideboard card in Mono Green Landfall, and those things kind of change places, and that could change a lot of the matchups. You know, even just for Mono Green, change a lot of the matchups to be closer between that and Nursery is kind of like a grind you're playing you have access to, which you need access to less often than just, hey, I'm gonna, you know, double this thing's power 2 or 3 times in a turn, and, you know, good luck with that. But I don't know. There's so much room to explore, and I think that was really clear going into the RC. That, I mean, I was even like, I'm kind of sure I'm not going to find everything. I'm kind of hoping people don't find everything, because I know I'm going to play something kind of stock. But even for the Pro Tour, it feels like there's still so much open room to play with. I don't know how you feel about that, Mason.
Yeah, I think there is some room. I think, like, I'm really interested in Cub. I think I mentioned Tristan's deck in passing. I don't think we really hopped into, like, this idea of, like, a 4-color Cub deck, right? That, like, ultimately won the event. I think there's a lot of, like, you know, like, that sort of space I think should be explored more, even if it's just 3 colors. You know, I think there is a lot that could happen. And this is one of the weird parts about having a Pro Tour so soon, right? Is that there is time for someone to theoretically break it due to, like, previous season, and players, you know, they start testing and working these things right away for the PT. But also the incentives to learn limited are super huge at the Pro Tour, and locking in something that's relatively safe in stock is not unreasonable. And so it's interesting, because I think we're early enough that there could be some huge breakout deck that we've all missed, or some innovation on something like one of these decks we talked about, whether that's like a Clear and Conquer mid-range deck, or an Elementals deck, or some new version of Izzet, like maybe Izzet Splash Portal becomes, like, you know, some sort of thing. Like, I think there is room for something like that to happen. I also think there's room for it just to be like, well, limited was really challenging for us, so we locked in, you know, Bant Airbending again, or a Simic Cub, or a Boroid style. You know, I think that that's, like, a totally reasonable place to be. And I'm curious to see, you know, will players really, like, break it out, etc. I've seen some tweets from players like McWinsauce, like, our brew is really spicy. I'm trying really hard to get to America, and this winter weather is killing me. And like he can't fly in, but he's like paying, like he's implying that he's like buying all these new tickets and doing everything he can to get here because their brew is so good. And players always like to joke with those sort of things, and I think tease a little and hype it up, and I enjoy that sort of thing that happens. But I'm curious to see like how will it all look when the chips fall, and then what will be sort of the end state of this format that is so incredibly short-lived, as we are like right around the corner from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle spoilers starting, and like the previews for that are about to happen, and we're gonna have a new set again. And so I don't know. I feel like I mentioned this a lot, like, and I really feel it in my heart. I feel like this is potentially a pretty great standard format that will not get its time to get fully fleshed out on like what could have been the natural end state. And I think people will leave the format with a lot of like, yeah, I know everyone said X was the best deck, but man, I don't know. I just felt really good with YZ. You know what I mean?
I love it. All right, that is going to do it for our main topic. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is go to patreon.com/ccmtg. You have a Patreon $5 more, you get access to the Patreon Discord, as well as live shows that were supposed to start this week, but I'm a dum-dum, and I messed it up. But we will be back with live shows starting next week, and I'm excited for it. You can also ask Patreon questions in the Patreon Discord. Like Rusty, who says, I went to Portland and want to combine 3 matches in 6 to 7 L/RCQs. Have you ever had a run that made you question if you were ever remotely good at Magic? If so, how did you bounce back? Abe?
I have probably like one of these every year or two. I'm gonna be real. I don't know how you guys are, but I'll start by just saying that. Ones that I remember pretty clearly are like, there was a string of team events where I was the standard seat during like when Dominaria was the newest set. And because they were team events and my teammates were really good, AJ and Jonathan were carrying me. I didn't even feel like I was playing badly. I think I might have made some bad deck selections in the end. Like the first one was week 1, and I played a deck that other people did very well with, but it just wasn't drawing well for me over 15 rounds. But I think I went like 6, 8, and 1, and then like again like 6 and 9 or something in the team portion of these 15-round events where we were making deep runs, and I just kept on losing and losing and losing. Well, like, and that one's really hard because your team keeps playing and you have to keep showing up. Really, I don't think it's ever, I mean, part of the reason it's never kept me down is that, I mean, it makes me ask myself a question, right? Like, what went wrong? If I played that many events, especially I think if you, now I don't know what events you did play, but if it's all LCQs and RCQs and the RC, and you played the same deck for all of them, like, what went wrong with your deck selection, right? Like, what went wrong with your game plans with your deck? Like, is there something in there that was the cause of it? How much did you, right, feel like you caught the wrong end of variance, right? Like, what were the situations there? Like, really analyzing that. And when you get, especially in a short period of time, a huge amount of negative outcome feedback about your play and your decisions, that is demoralizing, but it's also a big opportunity to reflect, because odds are you're making some mistake, either some mistake repeatedly that is leading to that then you can be aware of and take action to adapt and grow from, or maybe you're making a bunch of different mistakes or a bunch of different factors are in play, and you can identify 1 or 2 of them and have the same the same upward trajectory as a rebound from it. And so while it does sting and it does suck and you spend your whole weekend losing, like, I don't know, I think I might just be lucky that when those happen to me, I tend to maybe lick my wounds for a week or 2 and then be like, well, I've got to get back on the horse because this is what I want to do and this is what I love. Or even, I went 1-5 on Sunday, had a terrible day 2 of my event, and was like still hungry to go out there and like, let me play more matches, man. Like, let me get in there and show that and show myself even that I'm like, I can do this and I'm better than what my results just indicated. But that's how I do it. So hopefully that's helpful to know that it does happen to, I mean, I think it happens to everyone, whether or not they talk about it. But You're not alone in having it be demoralizing, but you've got to just, when you can, think about it as an opportunity and reflect on what happened, like in the facts, because in there is going to be the thing that's going to push you forward. At least that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would say, Rusty, that this has probably happened to you before in other situations. So, like, I bet it's happened to you on Arena or MTGO or whatever your platform is, and you shrugged it off because it wasn't at the stakes that you were playing at. But, like, I have 2 examples for me that I went a year without top 8ing a PTQ in the old PTQ system. It was actually right after I took 2nd place at a PTQ where my opponent drew a 1-outer, or if he didn't draw it, I go to the Pro Tour, and if he drew it, he goes to the Pro Tour. Shout out to Dan Gardner, good guy. And I just didn't top 8 a PTQ for a year after that. Like, it wasn't like I got a bunch of 9s, and like it was just X2 after X2 after X2 after X2 after X2, and it was like, dude, am I just like, I've hit this wall that I felt real bad at Magic, like compared to how good I thought I was at the time. And I think that one taught me, like, if you do eventually that changed, right? Like, eventually I qualified for the Pro Tour. Things changed. I started dropping PTQs again, and doing the right thing over and over again. And I'm going to get into this during the always improving segment, but like doing the right thing over and over again is important. And another time that I think might speak more to this, I can't even remember if it was a GP or an RBPQ. But afterwards, I'm like dissecting something. I think it was an opening hand. And I present it to Michael Hinderrocker, former host of the show. And he's like, he puts his hand on the hand of Magic cards that I'm showing him. And he's like, Spencer, you are overthinking this. You are looking for a reason you lost a game that you are always going to lose. And you need to stop because you're driving yourself insane. And it was an interesting moment. It was like, okay, so there are times where I can do nothing, where I'm just gonna hit a bad pocket of things, and I have no control over that. And the challenge is to not look for those pockets of bad variance, because then you put yourself in a position to, not be looking for the right things. But there's also the challenge of, like, when it does happen, to just be like, okay, maybe I could have done nothing this time. So, Mason?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good things said by the other two. I think one of the things that I might say is, like, in general, I get that we go to the tournament, we want to win, but, like, how was your play, right? I could maybe infer from the question that you're like, have you ever run, because what this says is, have you ever had a run that made you question if you were even remotely good at Magic? Maybe you reflected on your play and you felt like you played really poorly, but I think question one should always sort of be, how was my play, right? Because like Spencer just said, there are some games that are out of your control, right? Let's just, for the sake of having a simple conversation, let's pretend 10% of all games are just predetermined. That's, I think, kind of a high number, but let's just have the sake of the conversation, right? So, and that's going to go in both directions. Sometimes I'm just going to grant artist talent monument, and you're going to mold a 5 and it's over, whatever it happens. Are you happy with the decisions that you made? It's like, there are some that are out of your control and there are some that are totally in your control. And you could have, maybe made a play that would put you in a better position to win, even if you wouldn't have won, right? Even if maybe at the end of the day, you were going to draw 4 lands in a row, you gave yourself the chance to top deck, let's say, a Burst Lightning and win, right? And did that play make sense to actually do? We're not trying to figure out how to win. When you're reviewing, your goal is not to figure out how you should have won that game. It's to look at, how did I play that game, right? What are my takeaways from this? And, when you're playing a bunch of these RCQs and LCQs back to back in these single rounders, like you were saying before about like to pick on your like medium of playing Magic of choice, you have had things like this before that happen, but the stakes didn't feel that big. And, I don't know exactly where you live, Rusty, but like I'm going to assume the average person has to travel to most RCs, right? And so you probably traveled and, probably was pretty stressful given everything that was happening if you're in certain parts of the country last week. And that sucks. That's a bunch of money, a bunch of time, and it can feel bad. But it's important to remember that like the goal of playing Magic is to present the best version. I mean, I believe your goal should be, I should say, is to play the best game of Magic you can and present the best version of yourself and try to use this as a vehicle to improve, right? And so if you think your play was up to the caliber that you are proud of it, that's all there is to it. The most likely outcome when you enter a Magic tournament is you're going to lose, period. There's only one winner of a Magic tournament. We talk about top eights because they're a good indicator and more people feel better about it, right? And also, top 8 first place is not that big difference at the end of the day. But from these single round events where only one person walks away, getting a bunch of tickets is not what you want when you fly across the country. You want to win and play the RC. This is a very normal thing to be frustrated by, but also it's what's going to happen. And it's just not reasonable for us to like base our happiness on the outcome of a game of Magic. Whereas how did we play? How did we handle ourselves? Yeah, I played really well and gosh darn it, Abe got me, but like I put myself in a position to win, blah, blah. That's totally like something that I personally am pretty happy with at the end of it all, right? I'm not ecstatic to lose, but I feel content with my play. Whereas I will actually, I try really hard to mask it, but if I play really poorly and I beat Abe and Abe played out of his mind, I can tell, and it's like I almost bungled this game or Abe drew 5 lands in a row. I'm like so mad at myself. It's like, yeah, I won whatever I got to the PT and I played like a donkey and didn't give Abe the best match I could, because I kind of strongly believe that one of the best things about competitive Magic is 2 people battling it out, both putting kind of their heart and their time and their soul in the line, and they're presenting the best game to their opponent possible. So if you don't also present your best game, you are cheating your opponent out of an opportunity to have a great game of Magic. This is why we play the games, is to have these moments, have these opportunities. So I would really try to look at that. You're going to have weekends where you win all the LCQs, the RCQ, and qualify for the Pro Tour. It breaks down both ways, right? But the best way to put yourself in those positions is to make good decisions. And that's the first thing. And the other last smaller thing I'll say, and then, I'll get off the mic here, my soapbox, is look at Magic in big time periods, right? It is really bad for us to look at one individual tournament, right? And we're like one weekend. Look at how your results are over the course of 9, 12 months. I know that seems like a lot, but most players who play Magic play for about 7 years, according to the WotC data that they told us once. And let's face it, y'all, if you're listening to this podcast, you are probably not the average Magic player. You're probably playing a bit more. So let's take a bigger picture approach. Let's really look at this. And if things aren't the way we want, what do we always talk about on this podcast, Spencer? Always improving. Let's figure out what we can do better to figure out how we can make this happen. You haven't failed until you've given up trying. You can do this. I believe in you. Hopefully I'll see you at the next RC.
Always improving is the point of the show. Every week we try to get better. And, the way to do that is self-reflection. And I'm going to take an interesting one this week. I thought about always improving a lot today to prep for this podcast. And there were a lot of routes I could take. But there is an interesting thing happening in the sports world right now. Which, Mason, I promise it will relate to you. Where people are coming down hard against analytics. They're like, analytics are wrong. We got to go with our gut, blah, blah, blah. And to the point where I was listening to a radio show today, and somebody called in, and they said, when you're playing blackjack, they give you a card that tells you how to bet, and for your best odds to win. But sometimes you got to go with your gut. I'm going to tell you, if I'm at a blackjack table with you, and you hit in on a card that will bust the dealer, I am not going to be a happy camper with you. The analytics are right. Your gut is wrong. And it is that simple. And I thought about this as it relates to Magic. And I thought about it as it relates to our Patreon question in some ways. Of like, listen, sometimes you're going to lose on the right play. Sometimes you're going to lose on the mathematically correct thing you're supposed to do. Because you know what? It's not ones and zeros in Magic. That's not how it works. And you have to be willing to accept that it's not ones and zeros. That it is a complex, beautiful game that it is your job to decipher. And you know what? Sometimes you should go with your gut. I'm not saying that you should go with analytics 100% of the time. Sometimes you just have the soul read. And you just know. Like, you just know without a shadow of a doubt. And, if your intuition is right, that's awesome. But I listened for hours today as people dunked on analytics as like this stupid nerd thing that doesn't work and all this stuff. And for context, the Broncos did not kick a field goal in the Patriots versus Bronco game in the NFL that sent the Patriots to the Super Bowl. But what they don't realize is the analytics actually said to kick the field goal. The coach actually went against the analytics and lost the game. But people are so used to they just want the narrative to be analytics are bad. And I just I think about the John Fingal quote, that there's always a correct play. There always is. The correct play doesn't mean you win. That's not what it means. It just means it's the right one. So, anyway. Do you want to say anything on that?
It is very funny how many people think analytics is when they go for it on fourth down. And not. Analytics is when it's the highest win percentage, or like highest success play available, or like decision.
And that's what it is in Magic, right? It's the one that is correct the most percent of the time, not the one that's always right.
Yeah. It goes back to what I was saying about the VOD review, right? You're not VOD reviewing to figure out how you could have won, and it's like, oh, I should have done this bizarre line. It's like, I did a thing that made a lot of sense in this moment for the things that happened in the game. It's like, I made a educated play that was reasonable. That's what you're looking for. You're playing by the numbers.
Yeah. Whether or not, like, should you have kept this hand, like, or should you have mulliganed? Like, is your 6-card hand going to be more likely to play Magic than your 7-card hand that needs to draw a second land? Like, these are things that are analytics. It's not.
I know, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here for what it's worth. Like,
I will say, most Magic players that I've spoken about sports with tend to have a higher view of analytics than most sports fans who I've heard talk about sports. I'll say that much.
I mean, they made a whole movie about it.
You're talking about Moneyball?
Yeah, Moneyball.
So, first of all, that movie's really good. Also, not what the analytics say anymore. In baseball, you're supposed to always go for the home run.
Yeah, because you always win if you hit the home run.
Right, but that's not... That Moneyball is about getting on base.
I don't know what the Moneyball's a movie about statistics and like playing the odds or whatever, right?
I know. I'm saying.
Sounds like, Mason, you just got a movie to add to your list.
I've seen Moneyball.
He's seen Moneyball.
Yeah, I know about it. I don't talk Moneyball to me.
Billy Bean was wrong. The analytics actually don't say get on base.
Yeah, you seen Begonia Apestein? Come back to me when you've seen that. How about that, boy?
How is your movie list going, by the way, before we move on to you?
It's going well. I've changed it to sort of now be, I'm going to get 365 movies in those days because I think it will lead to me enjoying it more. And there have been some days where I
watch a movie.
Exactly. Yeah. Even and then I started to feel bad when there'd be like a busy day and I watch a short film. And so I've changed the parameters.
Fair enough.
So,
what's your always improved?
Make your own rules. My always improved moment. I had so many, honestly. This was a really, really great tournament, even though I did not have the finish I wanted. It was still just a great time. One of the things that I tried to do more consciously, especially just between rounds, was think about the game that I just played and the decisions that I made in it and really focus on those especially with the understanding that I probably did not make the best decision. I knew that one of the risks this is something that also would happen to me a good bit on the SCG tour, and I don't think I spent enough time doing during that era. Was like I would pick up a deck on pretty short notice. It would be a strong deck that I knew a lot of the ABC fundamentals of, but maybe was not 100% proficient with, or close to that. Maybe I was in the 90th or 85th percentile. And this Cub deck, I definitely was not the absolute best player of. There were so many decks in Standard I needed to understand all of the interactions with, and all of the ways the matchups go, and I didn't have time to test all of them. So I leaned into the idea that I was probably going to be wrong and sought feedback on the games that I played when I thought I had interesting scenarios. And one of these came really early where I made what turned out to be a terrible play that did not cost me the match against a mirror match early on, that then I was talking about, like, oh yeah, I won my round, but this is the spot I was in, and it was like I made this boneheaded play when I really should have just made, like, I should have just cast my Nature's Rhythm for X equals 6 and gotten my Meringue of the Region, bounced 2 things, and then I think I'm probably just like an incredibly low percentage to lose. And then this actually turned into a puzzle that was posted on Twitter because there was an incredible line that Mason had that he just like started blurting out of like, oh, well, if you copy this and like get a cub, this is actually free, so then you can. And I was like, hold on, let's get the cards out and talk through this, because I don't think what you're saying is true, but I do like what you're saying. And so really taking the time, and I did that over a couple of different things, like not just these plays where I thought I'd done something wrong, but also just interesting scenarios I've encountered. And I felt like it had me playing more in a mindset of, trying to play each game that was in front of me better than the last. And also just trying to learn more and understand more about the deck that I was playing during the tournament than kind of how I approach a lot of tournaments where I know the deck I'm playing and, kind of know how I want to approach matchups and what I'm doing and what I'm trying to accomplish, and just go out there and try to execute that. But really focusing on the fact that I have the opportunity, especially because I don't necessarily feel strong in every single decision I'm making. And there are so many lines you can take with the Cub deck because you have so much access to so many things, and there are little intricate kind of puzzle scenarios that come up. And every opposing deck list is so different when it's open deck list. Like, there's so much at play that I want to take the most of that opportunity. I feel like I did. And not only to make the event more enjoyable and the sense that I felt I was engaged more with it, it also was a good opportunity to have some conversations, to get some feedback from players who normally I don't talk to, but who I really respect.
I love that. I also think it speaks to what you said earlier in the podcast about this format being a little bit different of a format. It is more of a puzzle format, from puzzling out your own things to also, how you interact with your opponent. So, Mason?
Yeah, my always favorite moment comes back from what I talked about with at the beginning of the show with Living End, right? And sort of being like, oh, this is probably gonna need a lot of work. There's a lot of moving pieces, Yeah, you could just slam 8 mythics in your deck and take out 8 uncommons and call it a day. But like, what are you gonna actually do? And I think I should have thought more about that and should have put more time into it. I don't know if I would have like personally like ended up in a different space, or like what I was thinking about going into the format and kind of what I would want to be playing or talking to clients about. But I think I should have just given that more time and respect. And it's a good thing of like, well, that this looks particularly powerful. It was a deck that was strong, but kind of lacked a fair backup plan and consistency before, or like a consistency, maybe the wrong word, but like it has some fail rate is maybe a better way to describe it. Are those things fixed with these cards, and like really delving into the details? And that might have been a better use of some of my time, and also just a moment of laziness and not putting my best self forward, which I don't like. So that was my always improving moment, seeing just the list that came out from people and how high on some of those people are on the list, and talking to players like Beardsley afterwards who qualified playing Living End.
Awesome. If you want to support the show, don't check out our sponsors. That'd be untap.gg. Use the link in the show notes, or use the code CCMG10, maybe CCMTG11 by the time this show is posted. And then check out the swag store. Whether you're on YouTube, that's right there. or the link in the show notes. Both of those have about the show. You can represent CCMTG at your next event. Join the conversation by joining the Patreon Discord, becoming a patron of $5 or more, or leave a YouTube comment. Comment on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you want. Like, comment, review, subscribe. They're the best ways to support the show. Where can people find you, Abe?
You can find me over at Blue Sky at More Nothings. They can also find me over Twitter at More Nothings, and you can, if you're interested in coaching, DM me on either platform or email me at morenothings@gmail.com. How about you, Spencer?
Don't find me. It's Spencer through nature. He's a game, but don't worry about it. Mason?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark every now and again. And if you want to trip our coaching, you can do that via my Twitter DMs, like we just talked about, or emailing me, masoneClark@gmail.com.
That is going to do it for this week's episode of Constructive Criticism. I just want to mention something really quick before we go. That, you know, I hope that people are staying safe out there, and that, you know, if you are protesting, that you do it, stay safe, and that, you know, you are valid. We love and support you, and we'll see you all next week with a brand new episode of CCMTG.